Hi everyone, it's Think Differently Thursday. We just got a really strange message telling us that we're recording this Zoom, which I've never had before, so that threw me a bit. But hi everyone, I'm Helen, Forge Church. This is Think Differently Thursday, and I'm really looking forward to chatting to Aimee today. Hiya, Aimee.
Hello.
How are you today?
I am good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Good. You are being super mum and you've put Addison down to sleep so we can chat, which I'm well impressed with. I've had people have to go and like stop dogs from barking and stuff, so maybe this will be our first like baby on the Zoom if she wakes up.
Well, let's pray that she sleeps for a long time.
Yeah, I was pretty envious when you were just telling me before we started recording about how long she sleeps for. That was never my experience with a baby. She'll sleep for a couple of hours, you were saying. Wow, amazing. Could read quite a lot of a book then. Obviously you'd be doing very productive things during this time.
Of course, yeah.
So Aimee, I was trying to remember when I first met you, and I think it was when we were both involved in an Alpha course, but I've no idea how long ago it was. I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, would it? Do you think?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think I first sort of got involved in Alpha, probably about 5 years ago, actually. I think it was 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, so we did that one. It was over at lovely farmhouse over in Wickham-Skeeth, I think, and then we did a subsequent one at Mind. I think that was like the next one that happened. Do you have like good memories of doing Alpha?
Yeah, I have really good memories of Alpha. Because I'd never done an Alpha myself. I did the kind of starting point equivalent with Chris Cobbold in the pub. So for me, yeah, Alpha was super interesting, to sort of be there to sort of help facilitate conversations, but also, to experience it for myself at the same time. So, really fond memories of lovely meals together and great conversations.
Yeah, I think one of the things I remember, Aimee, is that you don't eat baked beans. Isn't that right?
That's true. I definitely don't eat baked beans. They are gross.
And I think there was one random time, because people are so kind and they cook meals, don't they? And I can't think what it was, but it was something that the baked beans were in that was a bit random. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't. Normally it's like a chili. People put baked beans in a chili or in like a shepherd's pie. Sometimes you can find them in, and I definitely have to pick them out.
We had on the starter of church yesterday morning, I don't know if you were listening, Johnny did like if you had a fry up, what thing or two things would you take out of the fry up? And actually I don't hate baked beans, but I don't need them in a fry up. I don't need them there.
Baked beans, I would definitely take them out. And what is it, black pudding?
Oh yeah, that goes without saying.
That's what
Why is that even on the menu, I'd say? Well, no, Johnny thinks that's like one of the best bits. He was surprised it needed to go. Very strange. Anyway, let's go back further than Alpha and 5 years ago. Let's go back and find out a bit more about you. And so where were your family from originally? Where was growing up for you, Aimee?
So I was brought up in Essex. Well, I'm kind of on the verge of East London, so it was kind of Barking and Dagenham is where I was born and brought up in my primary school years, and then we moved out
in Romford, not far away.
I know. Well, then I went to school in Romford in my secondary school. So we lived in Romford for that part until I went away to university.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Oh, I didn't realise that you'd been in Essex so long. Brilliant. And growing up, what sort of a child would you say you were?
I was such a lovely child. No, so I kind of had quite a few siblings. So there's me, and I have two sisters, and then I have some half siblings as well. So always kind of around a big family. And lots of sort of family events that happened and lots of get-togethers. But I think I was quite an easy child. I was quite happy to please, and I wasn't a super stroppy teenager, I don't think. I was kind of quite a good child.
sounds pretty idyllic. Very good.
Well,
And
I don't know if they'd say the same, but
and sisters, I've got 2 brothers, and I just think, oh, it'd be lovely to have sisters. Really nice, particularly I think as an adult. I don't think I thought it as a child. I think I quite liked being the only girl, but I think now, it's why I'm so grateful that I get on so well with my daughter, because I kind of think we do the stuff that possibly I'd do with a sister, I think. So we're doing a course, just thinking about family again. We're doing a course in church called Emotional Healthy Spirituality, and it's kind of helped us to reflect and encouraged us to consider the influences and impact that our own family and the environment we grew up in has had on us. Are you kind of the sort of person, I like this sort of stuff, are you the sort of person that sort of is quite mindful of that and reflects on it, and perhaps is conscious of what you're bringing of your own experience to your own parenting? Is that the way you sort of think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, all the time. I remember, like, when Neil and I were getting married and talking about children, we would kind of talk about what a type of parents we think we were going to be, and what elements of our parents would we want to bring into that. And yeah, I definitely came from a house where my mum was quite an independent, parent. She worked, and yeah, really taught us that kind of independence. But she was also very loving, caring, nurturing. And definitely in my younger years, we got the "you wait until your dad comes home" talk. So if we were misbehaving, that was the line that she would sort of go to. And originally I kind of thought, yeah, like, I think I would want that as well. I would want to have the dad figure as that very authoritative consequence figure. But that very quickly changed when I had children, and yeah, in our sort of relationship, in the way that we deal with the kids. But so there's,
that could be quite hard, couldn't it, to be the bloke if you're like the scary one coming home and they're dreading it because they've been naughty during the day.
And I definitely think Neil is, if you know Neil, like, he's definitely not the scary one, and he's definitely not the one to, go in with the full consequences. He's that's not his style at all. So so there's things like that. And we did the marriage course last year in lockdown. Our marriage was fine, but it was really good for us. And yeah, in there's a bit actually that talks about, what of your family past have you brought into your relationship? And that was really interesting, in like just looking at the ways that we communicate with each other, and then in effect how we communicate with our children. So some really interesting things. And so Reagan is now 9, and I definitely feel like he's almost a preteen already. I don't really know where that's gone. So we're dealing with a new sort of phase, and there's a lot of back chat and a lot of answering back, and it, for me, like, I feel like it comes across quite disrespectful to me. But that's not his intention. His intention is that he just can't keep it in. He just sort of blurts it all out. So we're just trying to work through that as well, and how we parent in that, and what that looks like in terms of situations that he's come up with at school, in confrontations, and just the whole, we need to speak kind words even when we're not happy with people, and we don't go and confront people in an aggressive manner. Reagan in particular is very much an alpha, sort of alpha male character in lots of situations. Whereas my childhood, I was told, if someone hits you, you hit them back, and you hit them harder so they won't do it again. As a kind of defense. It's a different
mindset, isn't it? Bringing something
really different. Really different. So it's just really interesting. Like, and it was never, we were never encouraged to go and start any problems. That was never the, but it was about defense. You defend yourself. Whereas I've had to really rethink that with my own children, and it's really hard to not go, just stand up for yourself, but actually to try and rein that back in, and also come from a Christian perspective at the same time. So there's so much to think about.
And I think there is, isn't there? And I think we're always thinking about it. But of course, just as kids are growing up, particularly like with your first one, you are doing that bit of parenting for the first time, aren't you? So you're kind of learning as you go along. And you might think, oh, well, you know, we've done that stage, and so we're ready for it another time. No two children are the same, and so you will handle things so differently. I think it's parenting is a journey. I always think that just as you sort of get a bit comfortable with a stage, it changes.
That's exactly what we found. We definitely, it changes so much.
And so you've got a young family, and I know you teach as well. I'm at a different stage because my kids are grown up. But I think even in the space between, you know, mine being at the age yours are now and yours, I honestly think growing up for them has become harder. I think there's so much anxiety around and so much narrative around their own identity and how they identify. I know you're in school. Have you seen it change? Have you seen kids and the issues they face? Have you seen that change over your teaching career?
Definitely. So I've been teaching about 12 years now. So even in the 12 years, it's changed dramatically, just in the terms of social media and mobile phones. Like, it's so common now that every child will have a mobile phone by the time they come up to secondary school. And even in Reagan's class at the minute, like I say, he's year 4 going into year 5, and already a lot of his friends have started to get phones for their birthdays this year. And it's it's that pressure of never being able to like step away from something or walk away from it. It's kind of, it's in their face all the time. And I think that's really hard. And there's so much, you know, as we know on social media in particular, and even like TikTok as the kind of newest thing that kids love is, and adults, it's really, there's that comparison element all the time to other people, which I definitely didn't have that in that way when I was growing up. And it's a huge thing, I think, for young people.
Do you think that's the biggest kind of pressure that they experience, that kind of comparing themselves with each other? Is that the biggest thing for them?
I think it is a major part. And I think that, along with, like, you know, you touched on that idea of identity, of what their identity is. And I think, and even myself, I have to question as a parent, like when I'm putting my kids into sports clubs or different clubs, like, is that because that's really good for them and that's going to shape them? Or is it because I think that they need to be kept busy? And therefore, how do I balance that with actually us having quality time as a family? And I do wonder how we've become a culture where it's really important that our kids do this and do that. But actually, and I found that through lockdown last year, for us to actually just be at home, as much as they drove me crazy, it was a real slower pace of life. And through that, they learned so many new skills, I think, that they wouldn't have done otherwise. So I think there is a culture of busyness, of doing different activities as well, and being the best at those activities, and not falling behind in their education. So like, so many more young people have tutors now, which I definitely,
Really?
I was only having a conversation, and I know a few kids like at my school, and even in Reagan's school, that have outside tutors come in. And I think it completely depends on the child and what their needs are. But I just kind of think, wow, what are we doing? Why are we filling their time so much with things and activities, rather than just letting them have that downtime and that space?
I was talking to a friend recently, and not dissimilar to what you're saying, that all through lockdown, so she's got 3 little ones, and it was just simpler without all of the pressures. And she said they have very active lives, lots of outdoor stuff, and I think it's balancing it, because she feels like it's really good for them, and it is really good for them. But she said, I'm back into that having to be like military precision about organisation and who needs packed tea tonight because they're going off to club, and how am I going to get you there when you've got to be there. And she said, it's just, there's not almost an in-between. I think she feels it's just like, and I think lockdown just exposed that feeling again of just being together as a family and just creating your own entertainment, whether that was playing games or going out for walks. But it was simpler. I think parenting is harder as well, I think, than it was when mine were little. And I think it's what you're saying, kids are exposed to so much. Sometimes I think I get a little frustrated as a primary school teacher, because the expectation is that more and more we are responsible for, I guess, what I would consider is the parental role in teaching kids some of the social things, just personal health, or I don't know. Do you see that, because you're secondary education, aren't you? Do you see that, where you kind of feel like the emphasis is put on schools to do things that you think actually this should be being learned and modelled at home?
Yeah, I think there are some things that I do worry that children don't get that at all. They don't see or have those conversations that they should have with parents or family members. But at the same time, I'm struggling at the minute with education as a whole, I think. And I worry for children that are in our education system. I don't think there is enough emphasis personally on the social group teamwork activities, and especially since lockdown, because they've gone from having those tables in circles to back in rows. And I worry about that. And I know that some children thrive when they're in rows and they can just concentrate on what's happening up front, and then you've got other children that thrive on that group, like sharing ideas and working as a team. And I've definitely seen like a change in like Reagan's class. Like there's just a complete shift in dynamic since coming back from the second lockdown in particular. But yeah, I think it's really hard again, it's about that balance of making sure that we are teaching our children at home the things that we want them to know, and take forward into school, so that actually schools can concentrate on the learning of the key foundation subjects that they need to know. So it's just such a balance all the time, and a battle of balance within that. And as a parent, I kind of go, oh, they're spending 6 hours at school, so what have they done in those 6 hours? Like, why have they not done this? And then I come home and I'm like, okay, but you're here, you're with us, we are your guardians, we're your parents, like we're the ones that need to shape you. And that setting is there for just a tiny input.
I always say that much as we have a timetable of what we're teaching, as teachers we are not the biggest influence in a child's life.
No, absolutely.
We're not.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember that. And like I say, I battle that as a parent and as a teacher to kind of get that. So yeah, my mind does tend to go backwards and forwards all the time about it.
I'm sure. And so you teach drama, don't you, Aimee? Drama teachers. I had as my form teacher twice. I had the drama teacher. Drama teachers were just my favourite at school. Was drama a passion of yours, and was teaching always the dream? Was it kind of combining some things that like had always been on your heart, or was it something that you came into by a different route?
So I think like growing up, I was always involved in dancing and kind of like theatre shows. And so I definitely had an interest, and I had an interest in singing. And I just remember when I was at secondary school, just being really drawn into those extracurricular activities, and like just loving being part of the choir, and then loving being in like performances. And my favorite teachers were definitely my drama teachers. And I think that is like pretty much from when I was probably about 14, that's when I decided I wanted to teach. and I wanted to give back what teachers had given to me already. And I kind of knew that. So yeah, I already then started looking at what path I would need to take in order to do that from 14. So
so you've really kind of realized your whole dream as well. Fantastic.
yeah.
Did you so have you done any, like, obviously you've done acting and things, and you just said about clubs and stuff, but have you done any, like, what's the biggest kind of acting thing you've done?
So
I want you to say, actually, it was probably the one I did at the Globe.
well, so I was part of a school's project, and we performed at the Millennium Dome, what was the Millennium Dome, as part of like a community schools project, which was amazing.
Wow.
So I did that when I was at school, which was really exciting. So that's probably like the biggest venue that I've ever performed and been part of in. And then I guess from that, I don't know, I've done sort of shows in local theatres. So like there was a big theatre in Hornchurch in Essex, and I did some community, like I auditioned, and then through the summer we rehearsed, a bit like the Suffolk Young People's Theatre in Bury. Sort of similar to that. So yeah, been part of that. So yeah.
Exciting. I think performing is like one of those, unless you do it, you don't quite get it, do you? And that sort of tension between like the adrenaline and the excitement of like something live and being on stage, but also that kind of like feeling of like, I feel so sick. Why am I doing this? Why am I actually putting myself through this when it's so terrifying? And it's just like those two things, but always the kick after you've performed is, I don't think there's anything like it, is there? Unless you hate that sort of thing, which I guess
I actually, like, my first ever experience on stage, like outside of school, I froze completely, had stage fright and froze on my one line that I had to deliver.
Really?
And they had to feed it to me from the side because I'd completely frozen. And I was probably maybe about 12. But luckily I then managed to work through that, and I didn't then not go back on stage again. I worked through it, and like you say, I then managed to balance that adrenaline of like coming on stage and just loving that live performance. But even being part of worship and singing on stage, I think I'm definitely well known for always getting a song word wrong. And it's part of that stage frightness of the adrenaline and the pressure of having to get things right.
Sometimes even just like with hosting our services, if I hear the 5 before music somewhere else, it's a bit like Pavlov's dogs. I'm a bit like, I've got to go on. It's time. Mad. So we've kind of talked about family a little bit and work, and I know that faith plays a really big part of your life as well. And so, relatively speaking, I think you became a Christian relatively recently. Do you want to just like tell us what it is that led to that decision for you to become a Christian?
Yeah, so I'll try and keep it quite brief, but so we've been living in Suffolk, and we had experienced a loss. Our first child passed away after 4 days after a complicated birth, and that's kind of big part of our story, really, both for Neil and I. And that kind of then led us to like just drawing into our local vicar. Like, he was just super supportive through that process, and he didn't offer answers, he didn't offer an explanation, he just loved us. And had you reached out to him, or was that because he'd been involved with the funeral? Was that so he actually married us when we got married, and then it sounds so sad, and it is sad, but we then lost my mum within about 3 months of me and Neil getting married. My mum passed away. So our vicar was quite a key part of that time for us, both in our marriage and then through like loss of a parent, and then 18 months later the loss of a child. So we didn't go to church in between. That wasn't part of our life at the time, but he was definitely a key role for us in finding some form of peace in what seemed like a very like questionable and yeah, just emotional time, I guess.
Yeah, so you began conversations with him, and
yeah, so we kind of talked with him, and yeah, and then when we had Reagan later on, he was still part of our sort of life, if in one sense. And we were deciding to get Reagan baptized, because we were like, that's what we do, that's what you do that. And we wanted the vicar to do that for us, but he had moved congregations, and he was more than happy. He said, no, come along, let's have a chat. And then at that time he asked me, he said, you have never been baptized, would you like to be baptized with Reagan? And I was like, oh, what does that mean? Like, talk me through that a bit. And he said, well, like this is like the ritual of what happens is this, and we dunk your head under and things like that. And I was, at the time I was like, oh no, I want to look nice for my child's christening, so I definitely don't want to be dunked with water. And then he kind of spoke around the faith element, and that it's that public decision to say that you're a follower of Christ. But it was a very baseline conversation, and I think I brushed it off quite quickly, and I was like, oh, I'll think about it. And then I didn't do it. And then again, 2 years then down the line later, we've had Lincoln, and our third child, and we were like, okay, what are we going to do? Like, are we going to get him baptized with our vicar, or should we look for somewhere else? Should we do it local in Thurston, because we'd moved here? And I said, I just feel like I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to be someone that's baptizing their children but not giving the opportunity to learn about that faith that we've chosen, like to kind of introduce them to. And I was like, what does that really mean for us? And to my surprise, Neil was really on board, and he was like, okay, well, if you want to look for somewhere to like go to church, we can look at this. And I was like, okay.
Had that ever been part of your thinking prior to that you might look to go?
Not really.
Okay. Yeah.
Not really. Like, I think church has always been like, it's always been like in a distant part, if that makes sense. And so it actually turns out that my mum, when she separated from my dad, she did an Alpha course. And I remember the weekend away, for some reason we were there for one of the days, and it was the Holy Spirit day, and I just remember being in this room where they were going through the Holy Spirit day and just witnessing people speaking in tongues, and like having the Holy Spirit fall upon them. And when I was younger, I didn't understand what that was, or what was really happening at the time. And I was like, oh, okay, this is just a bit interesting. But I definitely have questioned a lot through my teen years, and sort of from hitting 16 onwards, life and death. It's definitely been a big question of mine. And I remember having conversations with my sister on holiday about like what happens after we die, and that being quite a big fear of mine. And I actually had a few panic attacks around it a few times, and it being quite a big thing for me, that I really at the core, I just didn't believe that this is it. I didn't believe that this is what we're living for. I just had that in my core, and I can look back now and go, that's completely God. Like, God was completely there the whole time, just waiting for me to take that step. But so it was kind of around, skipping back forwards, it was kind of around Lincoln, this idea of what we were going to do. And we came across the forge at the New Green with the big sign outside, and that made me kind of Google and stalk what the forge was about. And I just kind of I loved the idea that it was like really family orientated, really welcoming. And I'd also messaged the parish church, and it was, we have one family service a month, and I was kind of like, okay, I don't think that's for us. And so we were brave, and we came along to the forge, and literally the rest is history. We stepped in, and we stepped back every week, and we just wanted to know more. And we're really blessed with relationships and friendships, and and then sort of being discipled and growing in faith.
So it sounds like God has been a part of your life, even if quite at a distance, for a very long time, and you had all these different interactions and quite positive experiences by the sound of it. I love you know, hearing about your vicar, because I just sometimes think the church doesn't always reflect itself well, but it sounds like he was just kind and chatted with you at various times, and he was somebody that in those really difficult times you came back to. I think that reflects the church well, doesn't it, if it's somewhere that you wanted to go when you were in pain and struggling. And I love it that you saw the Forge sign and came along. Wonderful. Yeah. Do you remember a time where you actively made a choice, like, okay, I want to become a Christian, I want to say to God, come and be central in my life? Or like lots of people, do you feel like over time you gradually became more committed to life as a Christian?
No, I would say I think I had a moment. I think I'm quite, I was doing the starting point. We were doing starting point at the Forge with Andy Stanley on Sundays. And then, like I said, Chris Cobbold then arranged for myself and I think 2 others at the time to meet up. And we were going through it with Chris. And Duncan did a talk, Duncan Banks did a talk about divine appointments on a Sunday. And I was like, okay, what's this about then? So I remember driving to work, and I was working in Norfolk at the time, so I had a 40-minute commute
journey.
Which I loved, because actually when I was discovering my faith and learning all about it, I could listen to previous talks online, and I just remember smashing through loads of talks and things like that. And there was one about divine appointments, and I went into work, and on my way to work I said, all right then, God, if you want to just help me out here, give me some divine appointments. I'm going to pray for some divine appointments. And I just went into work that day, and I had 2 or 3 conversations with people that wasn't just about their normal daily routine. That's how it kind of started. And then I just would ask one question, or like, okay, well, how's your daughter doing? And then it opened up a whole gate of conversation. And some parts link into faith and some parts just not link into faith, but just having those deeper, meaningful talks with people at work. And I just remember walking up to the pub that evening going, you've given me those divine appointments today, you've given me those conversations, and I wouldn't have had them otherwise. And I'm now ready to follow, and I'm in, and I'm jumping in with 2 feet. And I just remember thinking that as I walked to the pub. Yes, that was great.
Fab. I think that really speaks into some of what Johnny had been speaking about at the weekend as well, just inviting the Holy Spirit to give you opportunities, or to prompt you, or to encourage you. And it sounds like, that's what you'd said, and then you were given those opportunities to chat with people. It sounds like that this was a journey that you were on, but even so, in coming to that point of deciding to be a follower of God, a Jesus follower, become a Christian, whatever you want to call it, it's a big life change, I think, isn't it, to allow somebody else to become so central in your life. Did you kind of get any resistance from friends and family? Did people think you had lost it somewhere along the line?
No, well, no one has said anything to my face. We actually received really positive things, and I remember inviting people to my baptism at the Forge, and like family and friends, and just going, come and watch, like come and see this take place. And then I remember my mother-in-law actually saying, I don't know if it was to Chris or to Johnny maybe, like, wow, like this has transformed her, like she could see something different in me, and that's only God, like that's nothing else. And that's really amazing that someone, an outsider, she didn't say it to me, but she said it to somebody else. And so that's really cool.
Amazing. What would you say personally, if other people were seeing a difference in you, what would you say was the biggest impact of choosing to become a Christian on your life?
I think I'd say the biggest impact was this sense of peace and joy. Like, and I know people talk about this quite often as Christians, and sometimes I'd hear people talk about it and I go, what are you talking about? How do you get this? And I would definitely say that's something that has transformed like the way I think, the way I react to situations, the way that I feel even in hard times, you know. So even at the moment currently, like my family's going through quite a lot of things, and my dad is quite poorly, and he lives in Eastbourne, so it's not close by. And even in this time, I don't necessarily understand it. I can't fix it myself, but I can talk to God about it, and I can ask him to show me more of him and through that situation. And it's so, even though I'm not necessarily I'm not jumping with joy or excitement all the time, I have this peace from God, that he's got me, and he's got my family, you know, whether they're Christians or not at the minute. This is so I think they're the two things that really changed in my life.
Amazing. And what about Neil, your husband? Was he on board? Because that could be really difficult, can't it? If you've come together and you've married and you've chosen how you're going to do life together, and then actually you've brought something else into it that wasn't necessarily part of the plan. I mean, you wouldn't adopt a child without kind of like doing that together, or even a pet. And so actually to involve God and make him central, how did that unfold with Neil?
Yeah, so we were definitely on different paths. Okay. We were kind of, the foundation was the same. He was on board with church. He was on board with taking the kids. He was on board with listening and learning. But he would say this, it didn't click for him probably until about a year after me. So he saw me kind of jump in 2 feet and then completely accelerate and sort of fly off, if you like. And I think there are times where he would feel like, not that he was left behind, but that he was kind of like, I'm just not there. Like, I'm not in that place. I don't think it created tension as such, but I think he definitely allowed me to do that. He definitely gave me space to step out and to invest time in, you know, running mates and 10-month group and a mission trip to Denver. You know, when we had 2 young children, he was like, yep, you go do that. That's absolutely fine. And so definitely like completely supportive. And then I would say he then took a trip to America with American football. And then something happened on that trip where God definitely sort of became very prominent in his life. And he kind of went, okay, the switch has gone and I get this and I'm in. And that's been, and then that's been a kind of another sort of 3-4 year journey for us as well.
Brilliant. I honestly, Aimee, I love your story. It's giving me goosebumps.
Oh, great.
And so on our we're doing, as a church, emotionally healthy spirituality at the moment, and it's been something new for us. We're doing it all together, and we've talked over recent weeks about earthquake moments. So really difficult, pivotal moments in our lives that have had huge impacts on shaping us, really. And I know for you, and you've mentioned it already, that you have in your lives, you've met with massive sadness and loss. So are you happy to like share those a bit more further?
Yeah, definitely. So as I touched upon, we lost our first child, Oliver. So that was like a normal pregnancy, healthy baby, was predicted to be a big baby. So completely, absolutely fine. And then, through the labor and the birth, it became very complicated, very traumatic, ended in an emergency C-section, which eventually I was then put under GA when they'd started the C-section. And then that resulted in him kind of suffering like a brain trauma. He had a fracture to his skull through this sort of big complication. And so the diagnosis was hypoxic ischemia, I think is how you say it. So basically he was starved of oxygen at birth. And he wasn't born with a heart rate. They had to resuscitate him. It took him 20 minutes to sort of do the APGAR score to kind of even register on there. So it was very bleak from the start, and obviously I was really unaware of this until later on in the process, when we kind of got all the sort of paperwork and results about it. And so was Neil, because he was taken out of the room. He was in the room to begin with. He knew that there was problems because they were struggling to get him out. There was then like this major panic in the room, which I think doesn't happen unless it's, very serious. Yeah. And then when they put me under GA, they escorted him out of the room. And he, like, his kind of trauma on that is, I didn't know if I was A, going to lose my child, and B, lose my wife within this process. So that's a really big part of our relationship, of our story, and definitely within that, God was so there. Like, and we weren't Christians at the time. And like I said, it didn't make me angry, but it did make me question the why. So like, why us? Why him? Why our family? And that was a big part, because we'd already lost my mum, and my mum was only 49 when she passed away. So she was
ill,
super young.
she, Aimee?
Yeah, so she had cancer. She got cancer around 44. So she was really young, and then that kind of then just sort of went to multiple parts of her body. And so we'd kind of already gone through that, and then we were hit with this. So there was lots of why questions. And actually, when I became a Christian and when I was going to church, I remember coming to an encounter service, and the song Touch the Sky played, and I just remember completely breaking down, and Neil kind of being really like, are you okay? And I just remember grieving again, but with God. And I just remember kind of in my heart just pouring out to God, like, I don't understand why this happened to us, and I don't know why this was part of our lives, but I trust in you, and I know that you love me. And it feels so hard to explain that to somebody that isn't maybe a Christian, or kind of wants to know, well, how did you know that from God? But I just knew it in that moment. And that was a process of then grieving Oliver's death with God, and God, God's heartbreaking for us in that. And then there was another account where it was a Good Friday service. I think it was at Stonham Baptist Church. And as part of the service, you guys played a clip from the Passion, I think, of the crucifixion. And when Jesus kind of cries out at the end, and again, I kind of broke down. And for the first time, I realized that God has lost his child. He went through the same pain that we went through. And I got it. And I was like, I get this. I get that you went through that with your son. And you know exactly how I feel. And that was just, it was amazing. It transformed my relationship with God.
Wow. I think that thought, not for those same reasons, really hit me poignantly once. And I think Adrian Plass wrote a poem, and I think it was called something like "You Understand When Babies Die," but exactly that sentiment. God, you lost your son, and that the resonance with that, definitely. Have you? People would say, I think how you've summed up that, I think, is so much the heart of a lot of what faith is about. Not having to say we like these circumstances, not even having to say we understand them, but choosing to say, but in all of that, I trust you. I think that is so much what faith is. But But I think for some people, the fact that you've lost your mum too soon and you lost a child, folk would say, well, what is the point in a God? That, you know, if these things happen, how can there be a God? Or why would he allow those things to happen? I think it's the age-old question, isn't it? Why do bad things happen? Have you come across that sentiment, or you know, how do you choose to answer it?
Yeah, it's really tough, and I think I've only really come across it once, and I was out for a friend's birthday, 30th birthday, and so I hadn't been a Christian very long at all, and the drinks were flowing, everyone was kind of having a fun time, and then it got very serious very quickly about how they felt about the fact that we'd lost Oliver. And my one friend, I remember her turning around and saying, I just don't know if there is a God, how he could allow that to happen to your son. And in that moment, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to answer that question, because there was alcohol involved, and I thought, I'm not sure there's any point in having this conversation when everyone's a little bit tipsy. Yeah. But I think I just remember saying, look, I know, and I've worked through that with God, and I've spoken to him about it, and that is and I may never fully understand why, but that's the relationship that I have with him. And then I kind of go on to a bit, I guess, the way that I kind of settle it is this idea of eternal life. We're not living for now. This is such a short time. So tiny. Yeah. And you can't even comprehend what that even looks like for the future. No. And I guess that's my hope, is that in eternal life, I'm not going to feel that pain anymore. I'm not going to know what that feels like. And I don't know if I will meet Oliver in heaven. I don't know, but maybe I will, and maybe we will have that restored relationship.
Yeah. I think society, in a sense, is much better about dealing with loss, don't you, and death. Yeah. I think in days gone by, your experience with Oliver, even I think, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, I think it would have been a very different experience. I think, things were a bit just swept under the carpet and go home and get on with it type thing. Whereas I think nowadays, medical professionals are very good at helping people to grieve, but also to keep the memory alive of that member of the family that you've lost. What do you do to still kind of recognize the place of Oliver in your family?
So like we said from the start that Neil and I have always talked about him, and we've always talked about what happened, and that's looked differently over the years. And we've kind of always encouraged our family to talk about it as well, because they went through it as well. Yeah. They've lost a grandchild, they've lost a nephew. And it's always really interesting hearing the story from other people's perspective of kind of what happened for them in that moment. I kind of, and it sounds quite dark, but I do love hearing those stories, right? Because it does make us think this did happen. Yeah. He was born and he was part of our life and
affected all of those people as well.
But so like in terms of marking who he is and what he kind of gave to us as a family we've got pictures of him. Like, we were so fortunate that we did have 4 days, and in those times we did take photographs and we did read stories and we did manage to have time with him. And so Reagan and Lincoln and even Addison, now she can now say Oliver. She points at the picture and she says Oliver. And so like they know that that's their big brother. They don't necessarily understand it, and that's something that each year as well, like there's new conversations around that. So even with Reagan and Lincoln, and just every now and again you'll be in the car and they'll just come out with something about Oliver being in heaven, and like, okay, and then they'll ask a new question about what happened, and it's just having that open dialogue with them all the time. And You know, we do visit, like
So healthy, isn't it, Aimee? Really
yeah,
healthy that
it
no one is
is.
feeling they've got to not say or and
Yeah.
hold it in. It's so healthy.
Yeah, and we just want them to know that, like, yeah, this happened to us, but look, we're okay. Like, we've come through this time, and we have you guys. And so yeah, we do mark things on, like, his birthday. We will have a cake, whether it's, you know, a Colin the Caterpillar, or if it's I mean, we did do some balloon releases, which now I know isn't, you know, sort of an eco-friendly thing to do, and things like that. But so last year was actually, he would have been 10. So we set a target of wanting to raise 3,600 and, no, was it, how many days in a year?
365.
That's it. So we wanted to raise that amount in thousands. And so we kind of, set about doing some different fundraising challenges to sort of make that happen. And like, my friend Lizzie and my sister run a half marathon in Cambridge. And then I did a birthday fundraiser because of COVID, of course. All the cake sales and quiz nights that we'd had planned went out the window, but people were so generous. And even on Facebook, when you can do that sort of just giving page for a charity, I did that for like my birthday and for what would have been Oliver's birthday, and people were so generous and gave to that. And so we sort of, within that, we raised money for Petals, which is a bereavement counselling service for people that have experienced perinatal loss and infant loss, because they were a big key part in our story and how we managed and coped within that. And then and we've also then raised money for Adam Brooks for the Rosie Hospital, because he went there for to the neonatal unit, and he was the biggest baby in there. It was ridiculous, £8.4. But so we definitely do try and do things to mark that around the time, and also just that open conversation in the house whenever people want to talk about it.
I think you're really inspirational, and I think your openness and your vulnerability, I think, you know, even people listening to this, I think it will be really helpful to people. And beyond that, you're such an asset to us as a church. We love what you do, particularly like with your singing and leading, and you're brilliant in groups. I've been in some groups with you, and you bring such huge kind of energy and enthusiasm to them, which is infectious. You're just it's just brilliant. And yet you're leaving us, Aimee. You're leaving us. Tell us about the next part of your journey. Like, where are you off to? What's happening?
So it's really sad, actually, because it's not a move that we've chosen. Obviously we have chosen to do this, but it's a complete God-driven move. And so that kind of kicked off, I think, after Christmas for us this year. We definitely had a bit of a low point in our sort of, like in our faith journey a bit, more so probably with Neil. I think COVID has just done crazy things, and it's really helped and also challenged people to kind of evaluate where they're at, and especially in faith. And for Neil, he's really struggled with engaging with online because he just hasn't set aside the time to do it, and he hasn't been intentional about it, and he won't mind me speaking about this. He's very open about that, but I would probably say the same. Maybe at times I haven't been like that either. But a big part for me has been being part of a 10-month group, that kind of having that community of people that you can draw upon and be around. And and even my friends, like having Kat and Finn, who were up the road, and the Thomas family, just really key people in our church sort of relationships. And we hit a bit of a low point, and Neil did in particular. And I just remember praying about it and asking other people to pray. And we've been part of House on a Hill ministry, which is led by Lizzie and Mike Long. And I've been part of that anyway for the last 2 years, doing worship and they'd have like Saturdays up at the land that they had, and it'd be a big meal and then a bit of worship time, and the kids would just run crazy. And then we've been part of like a life group with that as well, which has been really key for us in helping us with our faith, especially through this challenging time. They are also now taking over the leadership of Freedom Church in Great Barton, and they just posed us with some questions of where are we at, what are we doing, and what do we want God to do in our lives. So big questions.
Big questions.
So we prayed about that, and we spent some time thinking about that. And then it was literally, Helen, like an overnight change in Neil in particular. Yeah. And he just woke up and he was like, I'm going to start reading my Bible, and not just reading a bit or reading plans. He's like, I'm going to work my way through the New Testament. And I was like, great, this is exciting. And I just can't tell you the transformation that has had on him and on his faith and on our daily lives, like just for him to bring that energy and to just be talking with God about that and spending that time with God and learning from God's word. It's just so
good,
it's so alive.
Because I think, like you say, this has been such a hard time with engagement. Yeah. But I think exactly what you're saying, that in a sense we're all responsible for our relationship with God, aren't we? And so we can put stuff out, we can suggest stuff. There's any number of, like you were saying, on your journeys, when you were traveling further to work, there is so much stuff we can tap into. But actually we have to choose it, don't we? We have to want to invest in that time with God. And nobody else can do that for us. No. So really brilliant to hear that that's what Neil did. And then
and I remember Emily speaking about that as well. Was that before Christmas, that time, and about when she was talking about finding that quiet time, that time with her and God, that she can just spend time. And I do think it is something that I've relied so much on, coming together on a Sunday, being in groups. I love a conference as well. I've definitely, and I felt like all of that had just gone from my life, and I was like, what does my faith mean then? Where am I going with this? How do I grow in this without these things? And it was all about taking responsibility for my relationship with God, because it's mine, it's not anybody else's. So it's up to me to spend that time with him, praying, worshiping, reading. So that was a big transformation. And within that, Neil had this seed that he wanted to start a Bible study group with some men from football. And he kind of said, I've just got this thing about football and Bible. And he's involved in Sporting 87, and he kind of he's assistant coach or assistant manager. He'll get annoyed if I get the title wrong. To the first team on a Saturday. And so then we spoke about that, and we were like, okay, what's this then? What are we going to do about this? Because we need to listen to God. If he's saying this to you, we need to kind of act on it. And I've always said, if God asks me to do something, I will go, I will follow, and I'll pick up where he wants me to go. And this is the first time, actually, maybe since the mission trip to Denver, where I've really felt like God is asking us to do something as a family, which is again quite a big thing for us, a first thing. And I kind of was like, am I going to listen to this, or am I going to stay where I'm comfortable, where I'm happy, where I've got good friends, and a great church environment, or am I going to be challenged to what does God want next?
That's really interesting, because again, recently we've talked about a couple of those things within church. We've talked about stepping out of what's comfortable, but also again on this last Sunday, just really talking about the Holy Spirit and listening to him, inviting him to speak and to nudge. And so you're saying about, hearing God. There might be people listening thinking, as in an audible voice. What do you mean? How did you hear God? How did you know that he is saying this is the path for you?
So I'll give Neil's example first, because he's been learning this really for the first time about hearing from God and what that looks like for him. And so for him at the minute, it has been through God's word. It has been the picking up his Bible, and it will be something in the Bible that just sticks out to him. And that just, almost like it's been highlighted. It's that kind of moment where you're reading through something and then it's that one thing that kind of stands out. And so it's just, I guess, but it's allowing space and time to do that and to recognize what that is. And so for Neil, it was things all about fellowship. There was so much that he was reading and that was sticking out about fellowship and being devoted to fellowship and what that meant. And so then through our conversations, when he was bringing that up to me, we were then able to then hash that out and think about, okay. And so I challenged Neil quite a lot in thinking about fellowship, because he isn't one to be I think we see fellowship as a big congregational or a big group sort of event. And actually fellowship can be one-on-one. It can be in a small group. And I challenged him, where is your fellowship and how are you going to bring that to other people? So for him, it was definitely through reading God's word and through worship music. Really, for him, hearing from God was about certain worship songs coming through, and that again, the lyrics, the words. I think Neil's a really word person, and so for him, that's kind of what comes through.
So did he feel that he was reading things in the Bible and hearing things in songs, and the same things were coming through, and so that sort of confirmed it? Okay,
absolutely, like I say, it was definitely this idea of fellowship, and it had come up about 6 times in 3 days. And that's when we kind of went, we need to be listening to this. Like, what does this mean?
Again, that's so interesting, isn't it? Because like you're saying about taking ownership for your own relationship with God, hearing through what he was reading. Well, if he wasn't reading anything, he wasn't going to hear it, was it?
No, exactly.
So we might say, I just so want to hear from God. Well, what are we actually doing to allow God to speak?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's really important for me. So for me, it can look different for me. I think worship is a really big part. And when I say worship, I don't just mean worship songs. I mean being able to have conversations with God through my day, and just whether that's on my way to work, whether it's when I get into work, at lunchtime before I go into the staff room, kind of asking God to just like guide me in some conversations today. Like, let me show a little bit of who you are, Jesus, like through me. So like, how can I be that person? And I'm not like this every day. So this is, definitely making space and time. And so I think for me, I hear from God, through worship, whether that's worship songs, whether it's prayer, whether it's conversations and group time. So like at the minute I'm in a small group, 10-month group, 10-week group, which we have just decided that we just want to do Bible study. Like we want to, so we worked through Acts and we'd look at 2 chapters and then we'd talk about it. And I think through that's where I hear from God, hearing from other people and what God has spoken to, with them. But then also if I don't agree with that, then I feel like God's speaking to me in that way, because he's asking me to question and he's asking me to think about it. So I think that's really clear. And then when I make time to really sit and pray and listen, like God gives me like pictures, like visual pictures. So it might be of a forest and it could be like the light beaming through the trees. Like it could be something like that. Or for me, it could also be that God just gives me a word in my head, a bit like, I want to say you're like your subconscious, that kind of thing. So it's not an audible voice, it's a thought. And I just kind of have to pick up and discern what's from God. What do I think is from God and what is he giving me? But it's definitely time and space to think about it as well, and reflection.
And I think, sometimes I think we can fall into the trap of thinking that God perhaps is just limited to the Bible, but I think exactly what you're saying, on the course that we're doing, we've been encouraged to just like give ourselves a few minutes of just quiet. I find it so hard. So I often will choose to look at something or focus on something. And, I've just found God has spoken to me through images and through things that I see out the window or just hear during the day. And I think it's about a mindset, isn't it? Like you're saying, just saying to God, speak to me, and I'm here and I'm ready to listen. Yeah.
We also did a parenting for faith course to kind of with the kids, and I think Neil and I actually got so much from it ourselves. And they did a little exercise on there that you can do with young people, and it was about like talking to God, like chatting with God, and it was and then catching from God, so like catching what God has to say, so giving that space. And they just said like a way that you can practice this is like ask God like what's like if he was going to have an ice cream, what ice cream would it be? And then just seeing what comes into your mind. And sometimes you might get something, sometimes you might not get anything. And then ask him why. So why that flavour? And we did that exercise. And we also did it where you ask God to take you somewhere. So like, God, where would you take me? And some people got like a beach, and some people got like just like their bedroom, and and then that reflection of, okay, why have you taken me here? Why do you want to show me this? And it's just simple things that as adults we probably wouldn't even think about doing as a simple practice task, almost, to be like, what can I hear?
Yeah, but isn't there such a lot to learn from just being simple with it, I think, and allowing
and I
us
think
to use our imaginations, and they're all God-given, aren't they?
I think we definitely like to overcomplicate. And I think actually when we think about faith through children, and we think about what we would describe as maybe like naivety and innocence, I mean, God says, come to me, through the children. Like it's just so big that we need to have that mindset of a child. We need to simplify. Yeah,
really interesting. So you've got this new journey ahead of you.
I didn't finish that story, did I, really?
Well, so anyway, you haven't actually
listening to God, listening to God, hearing from God, and within this idea of Neil wanting to start this group, I was then reading Francis Chan, Letters to the Church, and within that he just talks about this idea of church being like not the building, not the place, but the people. So how can we be church? And this is something as well that, the Forgers also drawn a foundation upon us of what that looks like, of how we can be church. And it was within that we then felt really challenged about our next steps of what God is calling us to do. And as a family, and with Lizzie and Mike taking over Freedom Church, they then asked us, would we see ourselves being part of Freedom Church and possibly leading a house church within that. So they're looking at this similar idea of, big expression, small church. I think that's the right phrase. Smaller churches, smaller groups, but this big expression of big church, big God. So that's kind of what we've been asked to step into. Down the line we will look to host a house church, which will be on a couple of Sundays, and then possibly midweek as well. And then we will join Freedom Church for kind of 2 congregational Sundays within a month. So it's a complete shift, complete change. But we said we would listen and we would ask God. And it kind of, and like I say, through Neil's journey and his kind of acceleration in the last few months, he turned around and said, I see us at Freedom Church. I see us leading this group. And that's not natural for him. He definitely
brings more weight to it though, doesn't it? If that's something you wouldn't normally expect. Brilliant.
He's definitely kind of more happy to be the one that just kind of sits in the background. So for him to be stepping out in leadership is really big.
We're really excited for you, Aimee. Really just love that whole journey of faith that you've been on. And our loss is their gain, and I know that you as a family will bring so much to that church. So we really do, we wish you well, definitely we do. I've kind of got, I think it's because you're talking about hearing God and where you feel he's led you. Do you feel like God has a really concrete plan for everybody's life, or do you think he gives us various options? What's your kind of view on that?
That's such a big question.
Yeah, I want to know. I've had a challenge here with God's plan. I want to know.
Yeah, so I think I've my viewpoint on this changes, or has changed, and I used to get quite hung up on the fact that, okay, well, if God's got a plan and there's an A and a B, like, what's the point then? Like, why am I partaking in this? Why am I praying? Like, what is this all about? And actually, something I've learned is that we've obviously been given free will, free choice. And so I kind of envisage it like a tube map. I think someone gave me this kind of image before, and okay, I might start at Liverpool Street and I might want to get to Hyde Park, but there are so many routes and stops that I can make along the way. And just because there is a line that goes, like the central line might go straight through, that doesn't mean that that's the right journey. So I think for me it is about just going back and asking those questions, whether that's about a job situation or whether it's about a house move. I mean, they're quite big decisions, but whether it's about are we going to lead something, or are we going to take a moment to step back? And I definitely had that before as well. So like I say, I jumped 2 feet in and really got involved, and that is my personality. And then just before having Addison in particular, I really felt God was asking me to rest and to be still. And I think he'd been asking me to do that for about 18 months, and I just wasn't listening. And so within that, I had to make a decision as to I was part of 242 at the same time. I was helping with an alpha. I was then starting to be on worship, and I felt God really sort of saying to me, I need you to rest and be still. You need to choose one thing and give your energy to that one thing. At that time, I now feel God saying, okay, you're rested, you've been still, let's go, let's start the new start the new part of the journey. And I just think you just really need to take the time to know what God wants in those situations, and remember the heart of why you're serving is for him. He doesn't serve us, we serve him. And so what does that look like?
I love that. Such a great answer. Fab. Oh, Aimee, honestly, I feel like I could just talk to you all day. So interesting, and so excited. Really, really excited for you. I think just in wrapping up, that's been some fairly heavy questions there. Let's go for a light one, shall we? So finally, summer's coming. Are you a summer person, Aimee?
I love summer.
Me too.
Yes.
So if you could create or curate the perfect summer, what would be your top 3 components?
Okay, this is quite a big question rather than an easy one.
I thought this was the light one.
I mean, so 3 components. Okay, so I'd go with sunshine.
Yes.
Is that a component? Is that like a thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So sunshine, people, like that, friends and family.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I love a beach, so I would also put a beach in there.
Right. Yeah.
I love
about the pool
day.
than the beach, I think. Really.
I mean, Neil hates sand, so it's an interesting, but I love a beach day. I would go, sunshine, beach, and people would be my 3 components.
I reckon I'd go very similar. I think I'd put in a request for, and I think we got it last year, but it's unusual for England, warm, balmy evenings that stay warm till 10, 11, because you get that abroad, don't you? But in this country, often
Yeah.
7 o'clock, and then you're wrapping up and it's just too cold to be outside. But I think I love an evening where it's been a hot day, but then you're still sitting around outside and just, it's still warm.
Where is it? Come on.
I know. God. I think there, I don't know if I should say it, but I think there's talk of it being hot for half term.
I've seen that on the weather. I really hope so. We've got this amazing inflatable slide for the children that we haven't used yet. So we're super excited for some sunshine.
Everyone round to Aimee's for the slide. Great. Addison stayed asleep for the whole of our chat, so it's brilliant. Thank you so much for chatting to me. I really appreciate you giving me your time, and you've been so honest and you've shared so much of your stuff, which at times has been hard in life, I realise. But I think your story, your journey just is so encouraging and inspiring, and I'm really, really glad to have chatted to you this afternoon and heard more about it. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me as well. It's been great.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Bye.